You're listening to Boomers Today with your host, Frank Sampson.
Well, welcome to Boomers Today. I'm your host, Frank Sampson. Of course, each week we bring you important and very useful information on issues facing baby boomers, their parents, and other loved ones. And as I do each and every week, I want to thank all of you because our listeners are growing all the time, and it's because of you. So many of you share individual podcasts or the entire show with family and friends, and I can't thank you enough. And that's why our listeners are growing each and every day. And I know why you do that, because we have wonderful guests and very educational, and we're not going to disappoint you today. We have with us an old friend who actually, before I even started doing a podcast, she was on my radio show and subsequently was on my podcast at the very early stage, and I'm just thrilled to have her back. Teepa Snow. Teepa is one of the world's leading advocates and educators for anyone living with dementia or other forms of brain change. Teepa is an occupational therapist with over 40 years of rich and varied clinical and academic experience. Her philosophy is reflective of her education, work experience, medical research, and firsthand caregiving experiences. Her advocacy efforts led her to the development of GEMS, state model for understanding the progression of dementia and changes in abilities. She also created the positive approach to care training strategies, which are effective techniques for anyone seeking to optimize care and support for those living with brain change. Teepa, I can't express how excited I am to have you, and just welcome to Boomers Today. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's great to be back, and it's good to see you again and to have a chance to talk with you again. It has been a little while since we've seen each other.
Yeah, a lot has happened since then.
A lot.
A lot has happened. And so we'll get right into the discussion here. So I know that right on your website, and I've heard you have expressed it before because I've seen you speak. You're wonderful, and basically that quote is dementia doesn't rob someone of their dignity. It is our reaction to them that does. So I'd love for you just to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. And so the thing about dementia is it does change your brain, and because it changes your brain, it changes your language skills, your visual skills, your motor skills, your social skills, even your way of being in many ways. And yet you're still you. And so if I do things like, Frank, what did I tell you? We talked about this before. To me, I'm diminishing you, because if you could, you would. Why am I saying it that way? Well, because I'm frustrated. That's me. Your dementia is not the problem. My reaction to your dementia is the problem. So if you ask me for the fifth time, do I have an appointment today? Instead of reacting to that, I'm going to respond, hey, Frank, you're wanting to know about an appointment for today. Actually, you do. It's for your eyes. The doctor wanted to take a look at them. Oh, hey, Frank, I have a question for you.
What's that?
Now, what I was able to do is acknowledge, wow, you're asking me the same question again. I got it, which means you're not holding on to what I say. Yet you are really aware that something different is going to happen today, and you're worried about it. So what I want to do is relieve the worry of the moment, but then transition you over to something else that is going to occupy your mind. And that means I've got to own that your brain changes will require my brain to do some changing. And to me, you can keep all your dignity. Did I make you feel less? Did I make you feel stupid? Did I make you feel like, oh my heavens? Now, I will say, for people who are aware of their losses, my reaction and response is different, because they're saying, I can't do what I used to. And I say, that has got to be really hard. You've always been so smart and so capable. It's got to be super frustrating to not be able to do what you've always done. Right. Again, my goal you still have all the dignity. I acknowledge where you are, not, it's okay, Frank. You're still doing so well. It's like, oh, don't patronize me.
Yeah, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but a lot of we deal, and as I'm sure you do too, we're dealing with families who
Yeah.
have various forms of dementia, like
Mhm.
Alzheimer's, but we're also dealing with families who cognitively the person is fine, but has a lot of physical issues.
Yep.
And I'm always asked, what's worse, you know? And my response, I don't know what your feeling is on this, but my response is that someone with, cognitive issues,
Mhm.
especially if it's has turned into some form of dementia, is harder on the family, maybe than the individual themselves. Maybe. All right.
Maybe.
And the
Yeah, the
physical,
maybe.
it's a maybe. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the physical issues are tough on both, but certainly pretty
Yeah.
tough on that individual. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's so hard because the thing about dementia is ultimately it does both. It robs you of both your cognitive capacity and it changes your physicality.
Yeah, it
I can't
does.
even figure out how to button up a shirt, which is stupid because, I know I should know and I can't get my hands to do it. I can't figure out how to make it to the bathroom in time. So there's such a physicality to it. We think of it as a cognitive problem, and
Right.
it is, but it turns into
To a
so many
physical.
physical shifts.
Right.
And by the end of this condition, there is a horrendous amount of care, physical care that has to happen for this frame that's left and the shell that I'll talk about sometimes, like it's the physical shell. Um, and the person is there, but it's a shell on the outside. There's a lot of reflexes that make it harder. So it's a really complex question, and it may depend to some extent on the family themselves and where they're coming from and who I was. Like if I was a football player, man, the physical losses could be really profound, but so could the cognitive changes if I have a dementia CTE, which is the
Right.
chronic traumatic encephalopathy, where I might have, because of the injuries that I've had, I have emotional meltdowns. And I
Yeah.
also have, you have the risk of me wanting to hurt myself. That becomes a real, like, because then we have mental health issues entering into the fray. So
Right.
I
Right.
don't know. I mean, they're all tough. I think all of them can be addressed better by addressing them than ignoring them. And I think that's the biggest challenge I see is we let it go for so long before
Yeah.
we're finally willing to address the elephant in the room.
Right. So you've been in the introduction, uh, I stated that you've been in this field for over 40 years now.
Yeah.
Um, so from 40 years ago to today, fast forward to
Wow.
today, okay, how do you see things differently than when you started doing training in the field? I mean, we could address different types of things, but
Right.
certainly
Right.
in the area of dementia care and support, and we could certainly talk about other things as well. But
I mean, yeah,
yeah,
anything we could talk about. Over 40 years, there's been huge shifts, and yet there's been no changes. In dementia, we have a huge number of people who are relatively early in their dementia, and we have a large group who have young onset. So they're younger than 65, they're younger than 70, and they have some awareness. About half of them have awareness that they're changing, and they still want to have a say in what happens. And they're advocating and they're speaking up and they're speaking out. And they're doing it in a variety of healthy ways. Um, 40 years ago, we would not have had those conversations because there was a belief that those people couldn't possibly have dementia. If they are speaking and they're able to do that stuff, well, then they don't have dementia yet. And it's like, we've come a long way in our appreciation for the idea that, wow, dementia starts a lot sooner than people thought. Because if I'm a university professor and I can't run my classes anymore,
right,
um, and I'm making mistakes when I drive, and I'm not managing my finances, well, then it's time to say, yes, I have brain changes, and it looks like it's probably a form of dementia. It's a frontal temporal dementia, it's a Lewy body, it's Alzheimer's. I have dementia. I mean, I'm living with it. And yet I can still do a lot of things in the world, but I can't be the me I've been. And this is where families are often surprised in those moments that it's dementia. Because I mean, but she can still, I mean, I don't understand. I mean, I thought dementia was end of the story, where people are not able to move out of the chair. And so families were seeing that as what happens. And it's like, well, that's eventually where we're headed. But over these 40 years, we've really come a long way at earlier noticings and recognizing, wow, we need to make a game plan here. The cost of resources has gone up dramatically, and the availability of resources has dropped dramatically. Even though we see more and more places, the number of people to be cared for in those places, we're a boomer group, and we're on that front edge. And they had to build new schools for us. I don't think they've quite figured out what's going to happen to all of us when we hit about half of us are going to experience some kind of brain change that's going to require more support than one other human being can provide.
Yeah. Do you think that people have become more educated, meaning this the generation now, I mean the boomers as they're aging now, that there was a perception some time ago, and maybe that's what I'm wondering, in your opinion, if it still is that perception that, oh, I'm going to have to go into nursing. If I don't stay home, I'm going to have to go into nursing. And from 40 years ago, there's a lot that has happened in the area of assisted living and memory care and all
The
that.
options are, I mean, we have many more alternatives than
Right.
the nursing home. And in fact, if you have dementia, you're not going to be welcomed into the nursing home unless you have something else going on with you.
Right.
Those beds are disappearing like nobody's business. I mean, that's
right.
where we are moving, is into assisted living, into hospice, into palliative care, into home care with support. The price tag on them is probably what will keep most of us going, what? And this lack of savings that we have. I wish I could say I think people are smarter. I think people only get smarter when they are confronted with the possibility of it being them. I think we still have incredible amounts of sticker shock.
Yes.
But no, I mean, the Medicare covers this, right? And it's like,
right.
Nope. Yeah, I think there's misconceptions abound still. People still think, well, no, he's only 70. They think dementia is only an old person's condition. And it's like, oh, my friends. I mean, I've worked with a 17-year-old.
Right.
So there's no, yes, as you age, your risk goes up, but there's no magic there. I think boomers are still thinking it's just going to be about my parents. And then they are confronted with, wow, it's about my spouse. It's about myself. It's about my sister. It's about, my daughter who has Down syndrome. I think we continue to be surprised because we're so scared of dementia, we don't talk about it. Sort of like we don't talk about death and dying. We don't talk about dementia until it's in the house. And then we're forced to confront, what are we going to do?
Yeah, years ago, people wouldn't say the C word, cancer.
Yeah.
It was like they went, and I think there was a
Got it.
period of
We've just
time.
moved down the alphabet, hey?
That's right, just moved down the alphabet. But do you think that's still the case today? Do you think people are more open to talk about it, or is it still the D word?
It's still the D word. I think cancers, I mean, the first question you're going to get is what do you have? Is it, I hope it's not. And they will actually say things like, I hope it's not pancreatic cancer. I hope it's like, were they able to treat it? Were they able to stop it? Did you catch it early? That's not the conversation we have with dementia, because we do not have a cure yet. There's still the huge fear factor, and there's still 95% of folks, this was just a year ago, 95% of the general public still thinks the only kind of dementia there is Alzheimer's.
Right.
And they think that there's the same thing. Dementia, Alzheimer's is the same thing, right? And it's like, nope. I mean, yeah. I mean, so there's still a lot off.
Yeah. When a physician gives a diagnosis of dementia,
yeah,
help me help our audience understand why they couldn't pinpoint it. Why isn't it Alzheimer's? Why isn't it Lewy body? Is it because they just don't know? So it's the general dementia. You have some form of dementia. We just don't know what kind.
Here's the thing. I mean, to be honest, only about 20% of everybody who gets evaluated gets a good evaluation, a full evaluation. Um, People are often discounted. Once I've discovered, oh, it's brain change and it's some form of dementia, the statement I still hear, and it's inaccurate, is, well, it doesn't matter because if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Why worry about what kind? And it's like, well, if it's Lewy body, we better double check that they're not being placed on particular meds because they're high risk. If it's frontal temporal, we really want to be careful that they aren't given some of the typical meds we might try with Alzheimer's. If it is Alzheimer's, I want to know if it's young onset or not, because there's more frontal lobe problems of decision making and money management issues. So, and concern about being taken advantage of. So I think, the idea that it doesn't matter, that's ignorance. And I think
Yes.
as advocates for ourselves and others, we've got to push a little harder for, I'm really curious about what form of dementia you think I have or my partner has. Do you feel like it's probably evidence? Tell me what you're thinking. Primarily, where in the brain is it activating
Right.
first? I
Right.
mean, I think if we were smarter about the kinds of questions we were asking, we would get better care, or we would recognize, ooh, my healthcare provider is not going to be helpful on this journey because they don't know enough. I need to find one that does, because this is going to be a long journey and I need a good partner.
And I know that you believe this, that everybody should have an advocate and somebody knowledgeable,
Absolutely.
because somebody that's going through this, a family member, it's
Mhm.
probably the first time they ever have. So they don't know
Absolutely.
the right questions to
Nope.
ask. So I'm not going to take you to 40 years from now. That's a long time. But what would you say in the next 10 years? You know, what will things maybe look like? No change or
I
some
think we're going
change?
to, yeah, I think the boomers are going to start really taking seriously risk reduction. I think we really are going to have a large number of us saying, I do need to reduce my risk. I do not want to repeat the last generation. I am going to choose to exercise and keep up my exercise pattern. I'm going to choose to eat relatively decently. I am going to keep a social network active. I am going to keep learning new things with my brain. I am going to address my sleep issues. I am going to get things treated that need to be treated. And I am going to own that I can choose something different. I can be resilient without being distressed. And I need to learn how to do that. And I think we're seeing more of us, not everybody, but we're seeing more people owning, I have a role to play in this. And it may not prevent it, but can I reduce my risk? Yeah. Well, I'm going to do it.
Oh, good, good. So Teepa, we're going to take a real quick break, maybe 30 seconds or so, I promise, just to recognize our sponsor. And then when we come back, we want to learn more of all the wonderful things you're doing, and talk about how our industry can really even do a better job moving
Yeah.
forward. So uh, does, I guess my question to all of you, do you know anyone who may be concerned about an older driver? Well,
Mm.
Senior Care Authority's Beyond Driving with Dignity program is a facilitated self-assessment program for older drivers. This program has been designed to serve as a vital tool to facilitate older drivers and their families as they make appropriate decisions regarding the future of one's safe driving career. If the individual is a safe driver, an advisor will provide him or her with strategies on how to remain a safe driver as they progress through the aging process. If driving retirement is the appropriate decision, then the individual and their family are offered possible alternatives, resources, and a specific plan to ensure a smooth and successful transition from the driver's seat to the passenger seat. So to learn more, go to www.beyonddrivingwithdignity.com or call 877-907-8841 to connect with a Senior Care Authority advisor in your area. We're back with Teepa Snow. Teepa is an educator in the field of dementia, and just such a knowledgeable person. We're thrilled to have her on. So, Teepa, you've done so much, various programs. Maybe you could highlight some of those. Website people could go to, anything at all. It's commercial time for you. So, tell everybody how they can learn more.
How can they learn more? So we have a website, teepasnow.com. It's just my name with no space. On that website, we offer to people many, many complimentary or free resources to get started. We offer a half hour of just a free consult to talk about what's going on and where might we be able to provide training, education, support, advocacy. For you, if you're living with dementia, for you, if you're supporting someone living with dementia, for you, if you're a professional trying to provide services to people living with dementia, or for a whole organization that's trying to figure out how do we go from where we are to where we'd like to be in providing support and care for people living with dementia, and maybe some people who aren't. Maybe how do we support families? We work with a whole variety of providers out there in order to help build a skill set to change how care gets delivered and how we feel about the work that we do, whether we're a family member or a friend or whether a professional. Really feeling like I have something to offer and I know what to do in these situations makes all the difference in the world in the relationship that I have with the other person.
Right.
So those are the basics. I mean, we have free YouTubes, we have free Wi-Fi stuff. We have a TikTok channel, we have a Facebook page, we have YouTube. If it's out there, we have books, we have DVDs, we have online. Oh my heavens, we have webinars.
Yeah. So you'll
What we
work
don't
with.
have, it would be easier to say what we don't have, probably.
Yeah. So I mean, you'll do any work with an individual family caregiver all the way up to an organization that wants to educate
Or
their
a
staff.
state. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
we're working with the state of Indiana on what they have identified as a public health issue, which is dementia.
Yeah, right.
And so we work with the state of Indiana to help figure out how are we going to support rural communities? How are we going to support small towns? How are we going to support family members who are not in the area? So long distance caring. How are universities going to be the support structure in hospitals? How are we going to do this?
And I know you speak all over the world.
I get a chance to do that. Yeah.
So those that might be interested in having you or a member of your team come out, and you got a wonderful team, I know. So
We
to
do.
come
We
out
do.
and speak, they can learn more about that as well, right?
Absolutely. And there's all kinds of events that we have going on. Some of them are virtual, some are in person. I go to Winnipeg, I go to Iceland, go to Australia, but I also go to Boise, Idaho. I mean, you name it, I've been different places.
Yeah. So, I've been in the industry a while, not as long as you,
Yeah.
but I've been in the industry a while. And I guess I just asking this question on behalf of all of us in the senior care industry, your opinion on how we could do a better job in supporting families and those who have been maybe recently diagnosed with dementia, or maybe it's further along, but what could we do as an industry to do better?
I think around the world, the only requirement for providing support and care for people living with brain change is watching videos. Anybody that's willing to do more than that, maybe test your knowledge, maybe try out some techniques, maybe develop a skill set, and really own that, and then encourage others in your community, in the workforce, to develop those skill sets. We now know there are ways to do things that matter, and they do make a difference. I think 40 years ago, we were experimenting. Did anything make a difference? We know now things like music therapy, animal assisted therapy. We know that being outdoors, dancing, moving, we know that engaging socially in a way that we find beneficial. We know theater, art, all make a difference in someone's life. So the concerning part is we get so invested in the self-care routines that we forget part of self is feeling like a whole person. And so I think sometimes we put that in the second place, like what we're going to do with our day. We're going to go to the bathroom. I don't know about you, but that's sort of like, okay, what else are we going to do? Because that really doesn't ring the bells for me. And yet for some people, it starts to be, like getting mom a shower. It's like, okay, but that's not going to make her day. If I'm getting a shower because we're going to go do something exciting, maybe. But maybe getting the shower is so exhausting that I can't do anything exciting that day. So it has to be the next day. But I think if we could have communities truly, really, when they tell me they want to be person-centered, be person-centered. And I see that they're person-centered with their staff as well as with their residents and their families. That to me is like, that's gold.
Yeah.
When I find that, that's gold.
So, I've experienced what I'm going to tell you several times when visiting assisted living communities, probably even more so some of the smaller care homes that exist around the country. And a lot of them do a wonderful job. But some of them, I'll ask the question, and this applies to families too. But I'll ask the question, what type of social activities do you have here? And again, we're talking about a place that maybe has on average 6 people, just 6 residents, and many of which might have been diagnosed with some form of dementia. And response I often get, not always, but often get, is they really don't want to do anything. Okay, drives me crazy, right? Because they may not want to do anything, but maybe you bring in somebody to sing or mute, like you said. But I know I know what your thoughts are there, but how do we get people to realize that just because they don't want to do anything doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing anything? And same thing with families. Well, mom just wants to watch TV all day.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she's
How
watching a lot
how do
of
we
TV.
address that? How do
Yeah.
we address that?
Yeah. So I start with the statement of like, wow, so you're feeling like she doesn't want to do anything. And I'm really wondering, Frank, if it's a possibility she doesn't know how to initiate. So
Right.
I'm really curious if maybe what the problem is, she didn't know how to get started. So I'm going to try something and I want you to then watch while I try it and see what happens.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to go, oh, hey, Frank, could you help me for a second? I want to see if you can help me. I have these 2 markers. It's a brown one and a green one here.
Right.
If I were going to draw something and it involved out of doors, which one of these do you think I should try first? Which one should I use first? What do you think?
The green one.
The green one. Okay, so you're thinking I should do some like maybe what, grass or something else first?
Yeah, trees.
Trees. Great idea. Now, what I'm going to say to you is I just engaged Frank. So
Right.
is it that he won't or he doesn't know how to? And so I think we have to demonstrate to them that there's more to a brain than wanting. Brain function requires that I know how to initiate. And if I don't, then I'm dependent on someone else to initiate for me so I can participate. And if you're counting someone out because they can't initiate, you're missing so much possibility.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's try it somewhat different. It's really helping people see by doing that something else is possible. Then I'll say, hey, Frank, I want you to try it. I'll watch. Here's the
Right.
2 markers. See what happens when you try it with John.
Right.
I
But
mean, but
that's
we've got
yeah.
to get people to try something.
Right. But that's a perfect example of the things that you could really help with. I gotta believe that's yeah. Because that when I hear that, it it drives me crazy. But
Yeah, I agree with you. What I'd say is what we fail to really appreciate, I think, is it is not rocket science, but there is a science and an art to supporting someone living with dementia. And if we don't say that out loud and make that like something special, people
yeah.
think, well, anybody can do it. You just need to be patient. And it's like,
Right.
no, you need to be patient while you're going to move a rock or something. But for
Yeah.
people living with dementia, I need some skill involved. There is
Yeah.
skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had somebody on the show not too long ago
Mhm.
that actually they have more of the Montessori method
Uh-huh.
approach to dementia care. I thought it was quite fascinating.
Yeah.
Thoughts? What are your thoughts on that type of method or approach?
Yeah. My experience with Montessori, and I have a background and I'm very familiar with the group, um, is that it sort of emphasizes this relationship of I am more than you. And so because I'm a little bit more than you, I am going to engage you in a way that I think your brain, and we're going to let it happen. And it's like, I'm going to encourage people to think, unlike children, people living with dementia are not having a brain that's built for play and curiosity. They have a brain that's been damaged by lots of inactivity and lack of opportunity. So I think it's possible, but I think we're missing a lot of opportunities when we simply look at it that way.
Right.
And I also think it's separating out things like getting up and going to the bathroom from um, entertaining someone with a program that you're going to put together or reading a book together. I think they all fit. And I think, how we go about engaging one another um, is really the bottom line. And I
Yes.
don't disagree with Montessori. I just don't think it's broad and wide enough to really encompass everything that needs to happen for people living with dementia. Is my challenge.
Interesting. Okay, great. So unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I'm going to
I
give you
know,
one
yeah.
last one here. I guess just words of wisdom for those that are listening that may have been confronted with a family member or maybe themselves with maybe a form of dementia or MCI or just kind of at that early stage, and they kind of don't know where to turn. What do I do next? Uh, my mother was just given this diagnosis that I'm sick about, and what do I do
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, so you're in a tough place, sounds like. And so
Yeah.
that's usually the first step is like, wow, that's a really hard place to be. And it sounds like you're not sure where to go next.
Right.
How's your mom doing about it? So my first question will often be, what about the other person in the equation? And I think because for me, when we're starting to think about helping someone living with dementia, I want us to think as there's always a second person that will
Right.
want to figure out who that is. And if there is no one, wow, all right, well, now we're going to have to figure out who's the team. But from the very outset, I want to start having us think about we got a duo here. And I need to look at both individuals, but then I need to put them together so that when we're thinking and talking, we're not talking to one or the other. We're actually figuring out what's this triad going to look like as we move forward.
Right.
Because there will be some expertise that I bring to the table, but there will also be expertise that one of the two of them has about what's the most important thing. So step one is recognizing, well, I'm glad you asked and I'm glad you came, because
Right.
there's way too many folks that don't do that.
Teepa, thank you so much for joining us on Boom today. Just a wealth of information. Check it out at teepasnow.com. Thank you so much, and thank you, everybody. Please be safe. We'll talk to everybody next week.
You've been listening to Boomers Today with Frank Sampson. To learn more about today's show, visit boomerstodayradio.com and join us next time for another edition of Boomers Today.